right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I first and foremost want to make sure everyone can hear me, see me, and make sure they can see and hear our panelists. We've got a very exciting day for everyone, and this conversation is very exciting. Let me know, start in the comments, dropping where you are tuning in from. If you are like me, you are in the Galleria area, and our moderator, Marissa Luck, our senior real estate reporter, also down the hall from me in the Chronicle office. We've also obviously got some esteemed panelists I want to introduce everyone to. We have Howard Bookstaff, who's a board certified legal expert in real estate law and the general counsel for the Houston Association of Apartments. We also have Shae Cottar, who is chiming in from the Buffalo Speedway area, of course. He's the chair of the Houston Association of Realtors. And we've got, last but not least, Ms. Laura Evans, who is at SmartCity Real Estate and Apartment Locating Services here in Houston, as well as a real estate, agent overall. So we have kind of full expertise on this panel today. So like I said, we are obviously going to be talking about all things renting in Houston, all of that and what it entails. So start dropping your question and answers in the Q&A or in the chat below, and let us know, are you in the East End like Laura? Are you downtown like Howard? Are you in Montrose or Deer Park, Tomball area? We know there's a lot of renters even in suburbia in Houston. Or are you in the Loop, which is probably, if you're in like anything like what Laura's told me, probably where your search has led you. I do see people in Westbury, Houston, and Richmond and Montrose already signing on, tuning in, and we've got Spring, Sugarland, someone looking already saying for a place for their son going to medical school at UT McGovern, and they're currently in Richardson. I see the chat should be all up and going. Let me make sure. In the meantime, let me also just go ahead and say, next week, we've got a really exciting event coming up. We have our new restaurant critic, Bao Ong, who is going to be taking your questions as well. And then we've got lots of other exciting stuff right after that. So stay tuned to the Houston Chronicle live event page, as well as our newsletter. And we will make sure to get all of the details of all the events coming up and get all that information to you. So without further ado, I see lots of people chiming in. I want to make sure we get to as many questions as we can from the readers. I'm going to toss it over to Marissa, our real estate reporter, and she will get us started with this awesome experience. So Marissa, are you there? Let's see.
Yes. Hey.
Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Marissa Luck. I cover real estate Houston Chronicle. We're going to be covering a lot of different topics, from single family rents to legal issues that you need to be aware of as a renter, to what you should look for in a lease and where people are renting. But first, I wanted to start just by asking Shae, and then Laura and Howard can chime in too. But how do you go about actually finding a place that you can afford in Houston to rent? And then my second part of that question is, what if you are a renter who eventually wants to buy a house and you need to be saving for a house? So how do you find a place you can afford to rent? And then how do you go about saving for that down payment?
Sure. Thank you. I would say, first of all, if you are looking at your budget and if you're trying to determine, where I can land that works within this range, right? Because everybody's got a different range. Everybody needs to know where they can find a place to call home that doesn't stress them out too much with the bills. And working, first of all, with a realtor is going to be able to not only look at apartments for you, they're going to be able to locate other potential avenues, not just apartments, but single family homes, duplexes, multifamily units. So when you work with a realtor, first of all, you get a lot of options on the table, and you can build a relationship with somebody who not only can help locate something right now, but then help make those connections to get you in the right position to buy later.
Yeah, and I know you have, what did you say? You gave me some stat recently that was like about how many listings are you can use down payment assistance
Yeah, yeah. So 97% right now of all the listings on HAR.com are eligible for some sort of down payment assistance. That's not necessarily just first-time buyers, although there are a lot of first-time home buyer programs out there, but there are a lot of, second-time buyers and a lot of other programs. And I think I read another statistic just earlier this morning that something like 70% of the properties that fall within that category are open to multiple different types of assistance that kind of can be compiled on top of each other. If anybody's interested, obviously har.com/down payment has a bunch of resources that you can look through and get a lot more information.
Yeah, so that's just something to keep in mind because I think when I was a renter, a younger renter, I was always just thinking of like, how much can I afford? Like, and I wasn't really keeping in mind, okay, like I eventually want to buy a house. So it's kind of a different calculus. The rule of thumb is kind of to have about a third of your income, no more than a third of your income going towards housing, right? So
Hmm.
so that's just something to keep in mind budgetarily in terms of what's affordable. But Laura, did you want to chime in at all on that and about like how you go about trying to help clients find places they can afford?
Sure. So we like to do a pre-qualifying process, and that's factoring in their income. So we definitely want to make sure most of the properties are going to be qualifying them on at least 3 times the market rate. So we definitely want to go on their income. And if they have a roommate, that's going to help with income. If they have a guarantor, that can help with income as well. So we have, a few different ways to help them as far as the income portion goes. Um, Definitely want to make sure that we may have options in other areas that may suit them depending upon their needs, right? If they need like a garage or if they need some type of different amenity that may increase the rate inside the loop, then we may want to look and, be flexible in other areas to make sure that we're able to get them what they're looking for in their budget.
Right. And I know that I think we've talked about this before, but what do you do if you don't have, if you have bad credit and you're looking for a rental place or you have no rental history? There's some people who have just been living with their parents or kind of informal arrangements and they don't have official rental history. And a lot of times landlords want you to prove that you have a history of paying rent. So what do you do if you have no rental history or you have bad credit or you're still building your credit?
Most properties are going to be qualifying you on 550 is like a blanket for as far as credit score.
Okay.
But that's not, all properties work with different things. So that's one thing that we make sure that we're gaining their credit score. So they're pulling their credit scores, letting us know and having that transparency so that we're, setting the expectations and making sure that we know exactly what's going to work for them, but it's all on a case by case basis too. So I wouldn't let people that have lower credit score or any type of negative marks to deter them from applying to an apartment complex. But that's where we come in because we do work with these properties all the time, right? So we know what those properties are looking for. Again, it's on a case by case basis, but if they don't have rental history, that's totally fine. They may have to pay a higher deposit as a first time renter, or they may be able to utilize the guarantor to be able to
Yeah.
help with that rental history.
And a guarantor could be like a parent. I think someone in the chat said they're helping their son or their daughter find a place. So that would be, I don't know what their situation is, but that's an example of how, someone who doesn't have credit might be able to find a place. And then what about renter's insurance? I know that pretty much every place I've rented, they wanted renter's insurance. And so is renter's insurance required in Texas? And, Howard or Laura, I think can chime in on this.
Yeah, happy to. First of all, with respect to the last comment, the last question, every property from an apartment standpoint should have rental criteria that they have in writing that you can look at before you decide to rent. So please look at the rental criteria, see what the income requirement is, see what the criminal history requirement, the credit history, and so forth. And that should not be a surprise when you apply. Before you pay any application fees, pay anything, check the rental criteria to see if you think you would qualify. From an insurance standpoint, Texas law does not require landlords to require insurance. Texas law does not require tenants to have insurance. Oftentimes, though, there is a requirement for renters insurance, at least the liability piece of renters insurance, and for the simple reason that if some resident falls asleep while food is cooking on the stove and causes a fire, the insurance policy for that conduct, but also it protects the resident not only from claims from the owner because they have insurance to cover those claims, but also claims from their neighbors with respect to the same kind of conduct. So it's a really good idea to make sure that you have the appropriate renter's insurance if it's required or not.
Yeah, and I apologize, you're breaking up a little bit there, but I think you were saying it's number one, make sure that you have the criteria before you even apply, and number two, a lot of places want or would require insurance, but it's not like a blanket Texas state law. Laura, did you want to add anything in terms of like?
It's not a blanket. Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit too. It's not a blanket requirement, but check it out, communicate with the management company to ask them that question.
Yeah. Laura, how much do you find that renter's insurance normally cost?
The renter's insurance can definitely, it depends on how much you want to cover, but most of the properties are going to look for at least $100,000 liability policy. And then whatever you want to cover as far as your clothing, your electronics, your jewelry, your personal belongings, that's what the renter's insurance is covering for you there. But like Howard said, some properties will offer a liability policy in lieu of having renter's insurance. But again, that's only covering the dwelling. That's not covering your personal belongings if anything were to happen. So it's a good idea to have renter's insurance, period, right?
Right.
So,
and you can bundle it with your car insurance. And I think it can be like $10 a month or something to cover your belongings. So, and that can even, like, I remember I had a roommate once whose like property was stolen and their insurance covered the stolen property because it was, from a rental unit. So it can come in handy too, just paying a few extra bucks a month for that, just for peace of mind.
right.
Yeah.
I see policies as low as like $5 a month. It depends on how much you want to cover, right? How much are your personal belongings worth to you? But, we partner with Lemonade Insurance. Some of the properties may have their own, companies that they partner with for renter's insurance as well. Or you can utilize, like you say, your auto insurance and get a quote from them and see if you can save some money by bundling that together.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, I think any of you might be able to chime in on this, but I was going to ask Howard, but just in case the connection doesn't work, feel free other people to chime in. But what happens? How can you go about talking to your landlord if you realize that you won't be able to pay rent? Obviously, we were just talking about you want to make sure you qualify before you even get into these properties, right? But if in case you get laid off, or let's say you get in an accident, you lose your job, and suddenly your income or financial situation changes. What should you do in terms of like telling your landlord that you can't actually cover rent this month or next month? Like, and how do you avoid, having that eviction or that last resort of an eviction, I guess?
Yeah, I'll go. I don't mind going first. Evictions are an expensive process and they're timely. And first of all, I think it benefits everybody for a renter who is hitting a financial difficulty, it benefits everybody to just communicate about that. There's so much leverage that can be given and so
Can you
much
hear me?
room to figure out the right way to move forward in those circumstances as long as everybody's communicating. I think that's the first step, is making sure that the minute you know something, you're not waiting until the day rent is due, but the minute you know you can't pay it, to go ahead and start that conversation. At least from my experience, and I'm not an attorney, but from my experience, most of what I've seen over and over is that landlords can be very willing to work with a situation as long as they've got good communication they can really kind of lean in on.
For sure. And I want to double back on that too. And we'll piggyback on what Shae's saying, which is totally correct. Communicate with the property, with your property manager, let them know that you're having some difficulties. Some of the properties are offering payment options where you can split your payments. So you're not, throughout the month, depending upon how much, how frequently you get paid. So that's helpful to a lot of our clients currently, is that you don't have to worry about this huge chunk coming out one time a month and maybe getting behind on some other things. So that's really helpful. All the properties are not offering, but there are quite a few that are starting to catch on and are starting to take that into consideration. And then there's also, check your local organizations. They may have some kind of assistance programs and things like that too. So definitely what Shae's saying, communicate with your community and let them know that you're having difficulty, because they may have some alternate options to offer.
Yeah, like there's, the ability to do, rental payments or pay it over time, or, put on, if you're, you're going to get a job later, like tacking on different, to the end of the lease, catching up later on. You can also, I know a lot of places you have to pay like a fee to terminate the lease, but that's something also it depends on the property, but you could talk to your landlord about getting out of the lease without facing like a major lease termination fee. So I think it's, and Howard had mentioned in our prep call, and sorry, he dropped off, I think, because of the connection, but he had mentioned basically what they were saying is, you want to be able, it's always looks better to the landlord if you're being proactive in the communication. I think a lot of people get afraid of kind of like revealing that their financial situation changes, but landlords deal with this kind of stuff all the time. And you want to be able to show that you were at least making efforts to avoid having that eviction on your record, because it is kind of it's, once you have an eviction on your record, it can be more difficult to find future places. Yeah, so I wanted to ask too about hidden fees. We have seen more, I guess, like more awareness around hidden fees, like in the media, like, it's been called junk fees. I wrote a story a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago, I guess, right before the Trump administration came in, about how the Department of Justice was suing this big apartment manager for so-called junk fees. And I think that that term is kind of being used for anything that's like tacked on extra. And there's a number of fees that are not supposed to be hidden, right? And theoretically, your landlord should be communicating with you upfront or legally. Can you talk about, I guess, what kinds of fees or hidden fees should renters be aware of when they're looking at apartments?
Oh, for sure. When every place that I've toured personally and with my clients, when you go in a tour, they should be giving you a fee sheet and they'll go over, what your options are, and as far as like the units, and then they should be letting you know, this is your base rent, and then outside the base rent, now you have these amenity fees. That can include pest control, it could include valet trash, it can include a community fee, community fee. Some have Wi-Fi that they're offering now that they're building into that. Concierge, package lockers. You can have rentable items like reserve parking or garages, different things like that. So they have all of that mapped down, and some of it even have it as a transparency tab on their websites. So I've never been to any property where they don't tell you what the fees are, but I definitely encourage my clients, if I'm not able to tour with them, ask these questions, ask what are the extra fees on top of that, because you may have to factor in an extra $100, give or take, or more, depending upon the property.
Right, right. So I guess when you're pricing out properties, like don't just ask what's the rent price. Ask, okay, what are all the fees, right? Because you want to be, like you said, adding that $100, or even if it's $50, it may not sound like a lot, but over the year it can add up. So that's part of the affordability equation, is factoring in those fees. And sometimes people, and I guess sometimes people like choose to have covered parking or not covered parking. So that's sort of why the landlord would make it, things that you can opt in, opt out of, but some of it you can't opt out of, like you were saying. So it's always good, and they to have that upfront, to ask for it upfront, and they should be able to provide it. They're supposed to be able to provide it to you. So, and I guess I'm wondering, like, what's the we talked, I guess, I don't know if Howard's able to come back on later, but one thing that we had talked about in some of our prep call was sort of like what is different about renting in Houston, right, versus other markets. And one thing that came up is flooding. So, obviously this is something any resident, homeowner, renter has to be aware of. But I guess, what happens, what do you do if your property was damaged in a hurricane or flood, or, the actual like unit was damaged, or like who's responsible for covering that? How do you kind of go about like troubleshooting with your landlord, what to do after that?
We've definitely seen, where we've had some damages in Houston, and the properties more than likely are willing to work with a renter to help get them either into a different unit, to transfer them into a different unit if they have any available, or to let them let them out of their lease without a penalty.
Yeah, and I know that one thing Howard had said earlier was like after Hurricane Harvey damaged a lot of places, but there are times when it's only part of the unit is damaged. And, obviously you have to work with your landlord to say like how safe it is. But sometimes if it's literally unsafe to go into the property and you have to like get your stuff, you can work with that landlord to have someone go help you access the site, that kind of thing. And other than that too, like when you're actually picking your apartment, you can also you can search online on Harris County. You can enter in the address and see if it's in the 100-year or 500-year floodplain. You can try to choose properties that are not in the floodplain. New construction now has to adhere to a lot stricter standards. So if there are a lot of properties actually that are built in floodplains. But they have to, now if it's new construction, if it's in a floodplain, they have to elevate it a certain amount so that, the actual property doesn't get flooded is the idea. So you can go online and search for any address. But what are some of the, I guess Shae or Laura can answer this, but what are some of the common, when you're taking someone to go tour a rental property, what kinds of questions do you think people should be asking the landlords when they're touring?
Well, and I'll say this about the flooding issue, and it kind of really dovetails the two subjects together.
Okay.
Because that's probably one of the biggest questions I ever get when I'm helping somebody and showing them different properties, is they all want to know, did this property flood before? And
Texas Harvey is whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so last year, Texas legislature, actually, there was a new law that went into effect last year, where now there is a flood disclosure that has to be given to any tenant who's looking at renting that property on every single family dwelling, if they're looking at renting. So there's a flood disclosure that should be given regardless, whether it's flooded or not. You should know up front. So we want you to be able to know. I would say that's probably one of the biggest questions I get. I think another question that I get oftentimes is, when people are looking at renting, again, it's such a microcosmic scale, right? Everybody's finances are different. Every location, our market is really hyper local. And so really when they're looking at these different locations, a lot of times I've seen clients look at, okay, I've got this much that I need to hold back to be able to put down for a deposit, this much I need to be able to put down for a pet deposit, maybe a couple of pet deposits. And at some point, if the credit scores are there, at some point there may be a conversation of, hey, even on a month-to-month basis, am I spending more money every month to live in a home that I'm renting versus spending the same amount or maybe even less to live in a home that I'm owning. And sometimes those deposits, those pet deposits, all that can create more of a financial burden to get in than purchasing a home sometimes, if that's an option, even if you don't have what people think of as 10 or 20% saved. You don't have to have that much saved for a purchase of a home. And there are a lot of times, a lot of cases where, we can get a lot of that either through the down payment assistance programs, sometimes through sellers contributing to buyers' closing costs. So there are a lot of opportunities there. So I think those are some of the other questions that I get a lot of times.
Yeah. And I think I just checked I saw Zillow said the average or the typical Houstonian puts like a 16% down payment or something like that. Not when I was living in Houston, but when I was living in Washington State, I got down payment assistance. And I think I put in the equivalent of like 5% or something. And then I got basically assistance for the rest of it, because I was really early in my career. So that is definitely an option. And something to ask about too is like, okay, because the single family rents can add up, right? So if you're renting single family and then you have all these other fees, is that the same as a mortgage, price? But Laura, I think you had mentioned in some of our earlier discussions some of the common tour questions that you ask. I think there were like 9 or 10 or something. What are those questions again?
For sure. So I definitely ask what utilities, if any, are included. Most you're going to have to pay water based on your usage, sub-meter at most properties. Do you have a specific cable or internet provider? Because, we have the fiber optic is kind of, taken over. So some properties will only offer one or, maybe a couple options, or they may only have one option. How often does pest control come and what is the fee? Our community amenities accessible via keypad, fob, or card. What does that look like getting into, their app, or how do I access everything in the property, right? Can you show me an on-site map of where my actual unit would be located? Some people want a pool view, some people want a city view, some people want to be close to the elevator or, different things like that. What is guest parking like? Is there enough guest parking for the whole property, right? Or is it just a 1 or 2 spots? Are you running any look and lease specials, and how long are they good for? Because most of those will be time sensitive, like 24 to 48 hours, right? Is there valet trash? That's super important for a lot of people. And can you email me quotes? Because some will just have the pricing on their website, and then some will email you a quote that may coincide with that look and lease special. And then how long is the quote for if they are able to email you?
Yeah, I had no idea that you could ask for a quote to be emailed.
Well, most of them have their live pricing online, where you can just go right online and just apply to that unit. But some doing some, it's just property specific. But
yeah, Shae, were you going to say something? Okay. No? So the other question I was going to ask both of you is, what are the more popular areas for apartments and for single family rentals right now in Houston?
I'm
sure.
Go ahead. Shae. Go ahead.
Well, for single family homes, the top communities right now in the HAR market area are going to be number one, Fulshire. There's just so much explosive growth going out there.
Oh, wow.
Number 2 is Clute in Brazoria County. Number 3 is going to be Shepherd Park Plaza area, kind of between, say, West Tidwell and 610. Number 4 is all the way out in Hitchcock, actually. Porter and New Caney is number 5, and then Timber Grove is number 6, right there in the middle.
Okay. Okay, cool. Some of those places I haven't heard of, but Timber Grove, Porter New
Right?
Caney totally doesn't surprise me. Fulshire too. We've seen a lot of single family home construction there, so it makes sense people also want to rent there. Laura, what about for apartments? Where do people normally try to go to?
The inner loop. I feel like the inner loop, that's the mega center of the city, right? So
Yeah.
people want to be close to work or whatever extracurricular activities they do on the weekends. They want to be close to the park and different things like that. So I would say the inner loop. Katy is another big area. We do a lot of searches out in Katy. Spring Branch is popping up, as a spring branch in like Greater Heights areas. Excuse me. So we're seeing those, like some of those, I would say, higher requested areas.
Okay. And what kind of obviously it totally depends on the property, how old it is, how big it is, what kind of amenities they have. But what are sort of the typical apartment rent prices you see, Laura, like in the loop, or in some of those more popular areas you mentioned?
For the rent prices?
Like,
For the
what do
rent
you
price?
see typically? Yeah.
So I would say the same for about the same unit. A brand new unit out in Katy may be 13 to 1500 for, like, let's just say a one bed. You're going to be looking at that like 14 to 16, 17 inside the loop, kind of for the same thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking for a newer property that has a lot of amenities, so you're definitely paying for location also. So when I speak with my clients, I definitely like to set the expectations, up front, if we're looking for a specific budget and what amenities they're looking for, what their budget is, and what's the most important to you. Is it price, location, and finishes, right? So we kind of have to look at that triangle and pick 2 of those 3 areas to focus on.
Price, location, and what?
Finishes or amenities.
Finishes. Oh, I meant, okay, got it. Yeah, I did check too with CoStar. So CoStar is a real estate data website. They own apartments.com. So according to them, the average rents now in Houston are about 13,700, and that's across like the whole Houston metro. So it's inner loop, outer loop, every unit size, every unit age. So it's a pretty broad average. But they said that the rent prices have been flat basically since last year, but they are expecting rent prices to tick up like maybe 2.5% this year, but that'll probably happen kind of later in the year, they're expecting. But I was going to ask Shae too, what are we seeing in terms of single family rent prices now in the Houston metro?
Yeah. So last year, it was interesting. At the beginning of this year, looking back, December of 22 or 23 to December of 24, rent prices actually went down about 8%. Now, since then, they've ticked up slightly. But when you look at prices for single family homes versus rental prices, those rental prices went down about 8%. Single family home prices for sales only went down about 2.7, maybe 3%. So they actually came down quite a bit more into, in a more of an affordable range right now for those rentals. Although, like you're saying, they did tick up slightly, but they're still pretty reasonable right now.
Yeah, I think I saw just before this, I checked some of the hard data, and it said single family rent prices were about 2,280 in January, which was slightly higher than January 2024.
Right.
But the thing also is there is a lot, while apartment construction has slowed down, single family rental construction is booming right now in Houston. We're like the one of the biggest markets in the country. I think I mentioned in a story recently, I want to say we're like 5th or 4th or something like that for new single family build to rent products. And those are what I mean by that is home, like construction. It's like homes that are being built specifically to lease out versus just like having versus just having like a home that, you know, was someone's house and they moved out and then they're renting it. So we should see a lot more supply of single family rentals, which will be great, you know, in terms of offering more selection to renters, because those are becoming a more and more popular product, especially as, you know, people are looking for an alternative to higher mortgage rates and stuff. So that'll be great to see.
Yeah.
But I guess what is kind of what is sort of the experience like, I guess, living in a single family rental versus living in an apartment? Like, how do you kind of decide what's best for you?
If you don't mind, Shae.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
You have the more privacy, right? You would have more privacy versus, you know, being connected to somebody, you know, to your neighbors, right? You may have the options of having an attached garage, but in those single family build to rent communities, a lot of them will offer the same amenities that the apartment complexes offer. The gyms, the pool, the clubhouse, you know, the leasing staff that's there, the maintenance, the pest control, you know, and those types of things. So so a lot of those properties are offering that. So you're getting like a home experience, but you're still having the benefits of being in an apartment community as far as that's concerned. But then you have your privacy. So you may have a backyard, you know, a private, you know, more privacy and more space as well.
Yeah, I've been amazed that actually some of especially the built to rent communities, they have like essentially, you know, the amenities that you'd get in like a luxury apartment complex. But you know, you don't have anyone living above or below you, which is kind of nice. But obviously, a lot of times that is more expensive than an apartment. So,
well, and most of those are going to be 2 bedrooms and higher, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms.
oh yeah,
and so you're not seeing a lot of those for 1 bedrooms.
Yeah.
There are a few, but we're not seeing a ton as much as we are seeing more 2 bedrooms and beyond.
Yeah. So, all right. So I think we are getting close to, we wanted to leave some time for audience questions. So Colleen, did you want to take it away?
Absolutely. We've got a ton of questions coming in, and thank you all. Get your last couple of questions in now. We're getting to as many as we can. So starting off right away, I'm going to ask this to probably Laura first. There's a lot of questions coming in about people that are seniors or 55 plus, because a lot of what y'all touched on was a lot of first-time renters, and that's fantastic. But obviously, 55 plus, are there differences to the search for apartments? What should the navigation be in that hunt, if at all different?
If they're looking for active adult communities, there are some active adult communities, you know, that are available out there. I will say that from the searches that I have ran for those, once people go there, they kind of stay there for a while. So it may be kind of hard to get in those places unless it's a brand new construction or something like that. But from the searches that I have ran for those, we are seeing like we have them, but then they're not in abundance, and then people are not really moving out either. So that can be a little tricky if that's what they're looking for specifically for those communities specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a lot of people chiming in about specifically retiring in Houston. And Shae, this question I'm going to pose to you. A lot of people were actually speaking College Station to Houston specifically. They're going from home ownership into retiring in an apartment. There were a couple of people saying that. What should they know? What do they do? Is that a smart decision?
I mean, if that's what they're looking to do, there's certainly a lot of ways to accommodate that. I think, you know, number one, set the expectations, right? Make sure you know what you're looking at, make sure you know what you're getting into. If you're thinking, you know, College Station to Houston, Houston is a very large place. You know, I think one question to ask is, What's motivating that move? Is it a specific location, somebody you want to be close to? Is it a specific price point or a specific lifestyle that you want to be a part of and you want to have access to certain amenities? Those are the things that I would ask myself if I'm looking to move to Houston from a place like College Station, because again, there's like 50 million different places you could go, and being guided by those things that are most important to you is really going to help you find the place that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll actually send this next question to Howard. This one is asking from someone who's renting a 2-bedroom in Boulevard Oaks. Instead of raising their rent at lease renewal prices, the landlord's imposing a $30 a month water fee. Is that legitimate, or is that a trend that's customary and even legal?
Yeah, so can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, in my absence, Shae and Laura and Marissa has done terrific. I've been able to listen, and I apologize for the connectivity issues. With respect to the water is actually very heavily regulated in Texas. The PUC, the Public Utility Commission in Texas, has a certain water rules that if you're getting if your water is submetered or allocated by the owner, you will have a copy of those rules with your water addendum. So you should look at those rules if you have any questions. But yeah, the landlord is entitled to pass along the water costs to the resident. So if you got a $30 increase and it's because the city adopted an ordinance with a $30 per unit increase, that's legitimate for the landlord to pass those costs along.
All right. Let's see. I've got another question saying, what is the ultimate hack to renting in Houston? That's a big question. Laura, do you want to take that one first? Ultimate hack.
Sure. What's the hack? Contact a locator. There are a lot of properties to sift through, honestly. Contact a locator or real estate agent, somebody to help you sift through. There are so many properties. And like I said, the rental criteria is different at a lot of properties, although it's blanket, but it's definitely on a case-by-case basis. So as transparent as you are with your locator, your realtor, about whatever situation that you're in, what you're looking for, that's going to help streamline the process and not leave the client frustrated from going out, touring, applying, getting denied, possibly, or, maybe finding something else that will work for their needs a little bit better. So definitely reach out to a locator to help narrow those options down for you, send those best options to you.
Okay, Shae, what about you? Ultimate hack you've seen or experienced so far?
Honestly, work with a realtor. That's the hack for me. And here's why. Every realtor is an independent business owner. Every realtor is an independent contractor with whatever brokerage they're working with. So every single one may have a little bit of a different business model, but I will say, in many, many cases, I saw this question in the chat about how much these kind of services or how much these kind of services cost, right? And you can't say 100%, but in many, many cases, the landlord will be paying that service for that locator, for that realtor. Again, not all the time, but having those conversations up front, having somebody in your corner who isn't there to fill the spot that they have with the property that they own, but they're there to advocate for you, to help you find the right spot for you, makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have a question coming in about rent controlled prices and how it can, rent can increase hundreds of dollars from one year over the next. How do you create a home as a renter, or are you just supposed to be expected to move from one year to the next property the next year and so on and so forth? Laura, what does that look like?
Wait a minute, can you repeat that?
Yes, someone was basically asking about issues with rent control in Houston and how they don't think it's a rent controlled city. I'm not sure if that's factually the case, but they're basically saying, how do you make a home when you're expected to basically live by rent prices that are just going almost every year, astronomically growing, and they're expected to jump properties every year, essentially?
Well, I have not seen the rent. Now, these are in apartment communities.
Mhm.
I don't see the rent raised too much when you do your first renewal. Now, control. The market does control that. It's supply and demand, right? So now with private rentals, that's a whole different animal because those independent owners, they can adjust those prices as needed. So if they, your rent, you move in, your rent is 1,500, they can raise your rate to 1,800 the next time you renew, which is quite a big jump for most people. So I'm not seeing that huge increase from year to year, from your initial move in to your renewal, to your first renewal. Now, like I said, the market is probably going to determine that.
Okay. And Shae, this is also combined with the next question someone submitted. Any advice to homeowners contemplating a move to renting or vice versa, like making a home as an apartment instead of traditional home?
Sure. I've talked to several people who are in that position lately. And I get it. There are a lot of benefits, right? I think, again, similar to my advice for the person moving from College Station, setting those expectations, knowing what you're getting into. There are some great apartment complexes. There's some great other facilities around our area, whether it's a multifamily complex or a single family complex or a single family home. But making the move from owning to renting, there's definitely going to be some adjustments in your thinking and your planning in how to budget. Again, thinking renters insurance, thinking, some of those costs there. Hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is maybe a better question on the legal side for Howard. Someone's asking about essential home housing programs. Are they a scam? Essentially, they found a great place inside the loop, but it would have been like $1,500 a month. And they're, asking about affordability for that. Is that the case always? Is it legal? What does essential housing as a program look like?
Well, I mean, we do have a lot of scammers in our society and our environment and the apartment industry. So if you're getting a deal that's too good to understand, then look into it. Don't just take it. We do have situations where we have people signing leases with people and paying money to people that really don't have the right to lease an apartment. So you got to kind of go beyond that. And I would suggest that you look into it. If there's anything that's a deal that's too good to be true, look at it. Certainly you can go on HCAD if it's in Harris County and see who the owner is and make sure that you understand who the owner is, whether it's a single family home or an apartment community. You can look at, if it's a bigger apartment community, you probably have a management company. You can look at that. So just be careful when you're renting to know who you're dealing with.
Can I piggyback off of what Howard's saying about essential housing? I deal with essential housing on a regular basis, right? And so there are income caps. So the essential housing program is designed to help the clients that live, everybody can afford to live close to where they work, right? So people that live in the loop, they may not be able to afford $1,800. So you have that income cap, and then they have a certain area median income that they can't exceed. So if you are making six figures, but you're looking at this $1,200 unit because it's essential housing, you're going to be over the income cap. And so some of the properties will offer different tiers, 60% and 80% for area median income. And if most of the properties that offer the essential housing, they will have that on their website, and they will say, for one occupant, you can't exceed this much for this tier, or the 60% or the 80%. If it's if it's so, how many occupants is it? And so that's going to determine what you would qualify for. And then most properties, they're qualifying on 3 times the market rate, and some qualify on a little bit less than that. Some qualify on a little bit more than that. So we just have to make sure that we are not getting upset with the property because we're applying for an essential housing unit that we overqualify for. Right. So it definitely help, our clients and say, okay, hey, we make this amount of money and we can qualify on essential housing. Is this something that you'd be interested in that can help you save some money?
Excellent. Okay, next question on repairs. I'll send this to Howard. How do you calculate a rent reduction for lack of diligent repairs on behalf of the actual units? And is there any formula, any special reductions or remedy or advice for people that are dealing with that?
No, in fact, most of your leases, you have to read your lease. Most of your leases do not have a rent repair reduction clause. And so the landlord is responsible for making a diligent effort to repair the premises. So if you have an issue, put your issue in writing, either on the resident portal, by email, make your landlord know about it and expect them to make a diligent effort. If you don't get what you want, or they don't fix it the way you want, you need to tell them, communicate with them. Eventually, there are laws that allow you to go to court to get a rent reduction. But I mean, then you're already broken up the relationship if you're in court with your landlord. So try to communicate with your landlord, tell them what you don't like about what's happening, and see if they'll fix it. Eventually, if you're not happy living there, move out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question for Shae. How does down payment assistance impact monthly mortgage payments?
So the way that down payment assistance works is there are different products like for instance, the Southeast Texas Housing Project, the SETH product, right? So when you make your initial offer on a home that you're purchasing, there's a down payment component. That amount of down payment is going to adjust how much your monthly mortgage rate is. So, if you're making a 5%, 10%, however much you're putting down up front, that's gonna really impact how much your monthly mortgage is. That's really the only way the down payment assistance impacts that monthly figure is going to be how it impacts what it creates on the mortgage side of things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Can I say something else real quick about, again, something that Howard spoke to, and I wanted to make sure that this was really clear too. He mentioned scams, and for the sake of everybody watching, I feel like I've got to say this. Please, please, please don't look for homes on Facebook Marketplace. Find somebody that you can actually touch, see, contact, have some sort of conversation with. I've seen so many scammers on Facebook Marketplace that'll take listings from HAR or apartments.com. All it takes is you take the pictures, make your own post, and then suddenly you got people sending you money. Please, please, please don't do that.
Very good point. I think this will be one of our last couple of questions as we wrap up here. Laura, I know this was kind of on your 9 questions of things to ask. Someone saying they don't want concierge trash service. Do they absolutely have to pay for it if that's not something they want to opt into?
So with the amenity, if that's an amenity fee, that is going to be a necessity for their property. So you cannot opt out of those amenity fees, unfortunately. So if you don't want to pay for the amenities, you may want to look into a private rental or to a property that has a lower amenity fee, a minimal or no amenity fee, if that would help them, if they don't want, to have the trash service and the pest control and, the Wi-Fi concierge, package lockers and all those things, then they may want to look at a property that just doesn't have an amenity fee.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, we are basically at time. I do want to say, Laura, on your final note, we have one of your coworkers on the chat weighing in that she really likes working with you. Brittany's on, and I absolutely want to say happy anniversary for 2 years, by the way. We forgot to mention it at the intro, I believe. It's officially Laura's 2-year anniversary at Smart City. And originally from Flint, Michigan, not a technical Houstonian by birth, but I think you've been here about what, 10, 15 years, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it's been quite a bit. I moved here in 2005, and then I moved to Atlanta. Then I moved back here about 10 years ago. So
that's long enough to be a Houstonian. I think everyone here would say that counts.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Of course, on that note, obviously Laura, like we said, is at SmartCity and a real estate agent on top of all of that. You know, and I want to say thank you to Laura as well as Shae, who obviously left his contact information even in the chat below. But he's always able to be found as, you know, at the Houston Association of Realtors. He's the chairperson there. And obviously, Howard, thank you so much for chiming in between meetings at City Hall. We know it's a little fun and chaotic, but, you know, absolutely look for Howard. If you have legal questions, send them to him directly. You can find him at the Houston Association of Apartments website. His contact information should be there. And yes, again, thank you to our, you know, master of ceremonies, Marissa Luck, our senior real estate reporter, who had fantastic questions for the panelists today. And Marissa's newsletter, Prime Property, is weekly. Make sure you sign up for it. And that will obviously have all the real estate news, renting, owning, everything included there. And then, like I said at the beginning, we have lots of events. HC Live is essentially almost every week. So if you haven't already, sign up for that newsletter. We will have a link to the YouTube channel that will have this video in for you to send to people if you maybe didn't get to watch it live. And we'll have all the teasing of the new events. Like I said, we have a one-on-one with Bao Ong, our new restaurant critic, next week. And then as a little special for the people who tuned in today, we may or may not have the mayors of Katy joining us later on in the month. So that's a little tidbit from me to you all. But again, today's about renting. Good luck with your rental search. And thank you again to Shae, Laura, and Howard, and Marissa. And good luck. Thank you, everybody. You all have a great rest of the week, okay? Take care.
Thanks,
everyone.
And if anybody's looking for me, they can find me on Instagram or TikTok at Laura the Locator, or Facebook, Laura J. Evans.
Perfect. All right, Shae, you want to give your email address one more time in case they missed it?
Sure. You bet. It's
Go
just shae.cottar@lpt.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, all those things.
Perfect. And Marissa just dropped her email as well. It's marissa.luck@houstonchronicle.com. And go sign up for her Prime Property newsletter while you're at it. We'll have a recap of all of this, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks again.